Well, welcome to this episode of Under the Tamarisk Tree. Thank you so much for listening. If we haven't met, my name is Phil Harwood. I'm a business attorney, co-founder of Tamarisk Business Advisors, where we focus on succession planning, among other things, and I'm the host of this podcast. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Dave Mullins from SalesStar. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Phil. Really excited to be with you today.
Yeah, so first of all, I would love to hear about SalesStar. Can you tell us what that is and kind of what you do and what your role is there?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me in today and hope to bring some real value to your listeners. SalesStar is a global transformation partner, a sales transformation partner. We work with growth-minded business leaders that could be founders, owners, CEOs, presidents that are frustrated with inconsistent and unpredictable revenue.
Mm.
When we work with them, we help to design and implement sales strategies that drive the opposite of that, consistent and predictable revenue. That's
Wow.
our goal. Our tagline is the science behind sales success, right? So we want the revenue to be consistent and predictable. So on average, our clients are experiencing about a 30%, 37% growth rate after working with us for 1 year.
Wow. I would imagine a lot of business owners have no idea what that looks like to have consistent and predictable revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the ups and downs of business ownership, the ups and downs of sales.
Mhm.
But you'd be surprised with a little bit of strategy and a little bit of science behind what we do. We can really, you're never going to cut the ups and downs out completely, but we can sure smash it together and get a much more consistent line there.
Yeah. So your website talks about coaching and training. So can you
Mhm.
talk us through some of the different some of the elements that fall into those categories?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It really is a difference between a sales trainer and a sales coach. I think training can be really effective at times, but training is typically focused on content. So you think you might bring someone in for a very specific, a closing workshop or a strategy on asking great questions, all really important tactical things. But we tend to work with our clients on more strategic, high level things, and we become long term partners. So my average client length is a little over 2.5 years. I have some clients I've been coaching for over 4 years. But sometimes the engagement can be shorter depending on what the need is. But we really dig in with the clients and become a trusted advisor, a partner to help develop and then implement sales strategy.
Yeah, and so there's just such a direct correlation between the predictability with revenue and impact on profitability, and business valuation, and ultimately succession planning and the ability to, hand off a consistently profitable, viable business to a child or to a key employee or to sell it, maybe to a competitor or private equity or whatever path you choose. So kind of walk us through from your perspective, like what are some of the components that someone should be focused on that affect not only revenue but profitability?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when we think about, I mean, the truth is, right, Phil, anything that we do now to help a business increase their effectiveness and their profitability, it's going to have the immediate impact, but it's also the more we can put in place that is predictable, is going to remove that perceived risk from a buyer, and it's going to exponentially increase the valuation. In fact, a recent study from McKinsey suggests that organizations that have very specific, well-defined sales processes um, will add at least 1 or 2x variable on their valuation. A lot of times we've seen that number can even go into double digits, but the impact typically is a couple of variables, simply because you're removing that at least perceived risk, right? If you can be a little bit more predictable.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so I really focus in three key areas, and we can talk about any one or all three of them, whatever you'd like, Phil. But we focus on people, processes, and performance. And all three of those have an immediate impact on the effectiveness of the business, but also on the overall valuation, whether again, whether that's preparing, like you've indicated, to pass on to the next generation, or a good solid exit strategy for a healthy and comfortable retirement, or whatever's next.
Yeah, I'd really like to
So,
break down into those three areas. So let's
sure.
spend a little bit of time on each one of those. I'm just going to listen quietly, and I'll let you know if I have a question, but I'm just going to give you the floor.
Yeah.
Walk us
Yeah.
through.
Well, you work directly with folks that are looking to either prepare to exit or succeed. So, um, jump in if you know you want me to elaborate on any one thing, but we'll start with people. When I talk about people, we right people in the right seat, right? So effective sales leadership, that's typically not the founder or the owner, reduces reliance on that founder and therefore reduces risk, and it adds a level of certainty and assurance in the sales strategy. And as you know, buyers pay a premium for predictability. And when we can remove the reliance on that founder owner, because the valuation, of course, if that person's gone, does all of this continue? And if everything is contingent on that founder slash owner, there's a lot of risk, and buyers can get a little squeamish. So we really work to help organizations develop the right kind of sales leadership. Perhaps it's early on, so we're recruiting. I've got a client I've actually worked with almost 4 years, and just this year, within the last 6 months, he finally exited. He and got exactly what he wanted and more out of it, and he's a happy man today, fishing, probably literally fishing today. But we worked with him for almost 4 years. When I came on with them, he was the sales leader. As the founder, he was overseeing all the sales team. And so we started by really developing the right processes and systems. That took us about a year to 18 months to get everything hitting on all cylinders. And then we started the process of recruiting a sales leader. And we hired that sales leader, coached him up, and with Mr. Founder out of the picture, everything is still moving along tremendously, because that sales leader he's got his hands on the operation. He's skilled up. He's a great leader.
Mhm.
So the right people can remove that dependence on the founder and significantly impact valuation.
Well, before
So
you,
that's kind of, yeah, that's what I mean by right people.
yeah, let me hop in before you jump over to process, unless you had more with the people side.
No, let's talk about it. Yeah.
I think this is very common for the owner to be, especially in a smaller scale business, the owner to be the primary salesperson and really control the client relationships. And, as you pointed out, that's going to reduce the viability of that business after the owner exits. And it's going to greatly impact the valuation of that business. But it takes time to change that dynamic, to bring somebody in, get them in place, get them trained, work through that process of relationship handoff to a new person, especially if the owner's been the primary contact for a long time, maybe 20, 30, 40 years with some of these clients. So this is not something you can do overnight. There's no quick fix here. And we see this all the time, whether it's replacing the owner in the sales role or building a leadership team, but creating some continuity so the business is viable post exit, right?
Yeah, it does take time. You're right. And it starts before we even jump into that. With a client, typically there's a lot of groundwork. We can jump into the idea of process. That's the second component, but that's often where we start, is process, because until we have the right systems and processes in place, and we know what's going to work for that organization. And that's key, because not every organization is going to have the exact same sales process. Certainly, there are some key components in any business to business selling that are going to be present, but there are uniquenesses to every organization based on the culture and the product and the location and all sorts of things. So we want to help them. That's what we mean by process, is really focusing on developing the right sales process for your culture and your organization. probably not surprised to hear some of these statistics, Phil, but some of your listeners might be a little surprised. But according to CSO Insights, organizations that have a well-defined sales process see a 16% higher win rate.
Wow.
Yeah. According to Harvard Business Review study released in 03, they have 20% higher growth rates. They're growing 28% faster than their competitors and their peers in the same categories because they have a well-defined process.
Yeah.
And the McKinsey study I referenced earlier says they have a 21% shorter sales cycle. So all of that data, just, I mean, we could boil it down this way. If I can get a really well-defined sales process, I win more, bigger products, faster.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't every organization focus on developing a very strategic, milestone-centric, best practice-based sales process?
Oh, that's a good
Just
question, Dave. Why don't they? Why do organizations just wing it year after year and not do that? What's
Yeah. Yeah, that surprising number, Phil. According to a study by the Objective Management Group, only 15% of businesses raise their hand and say, yes, we have a sales process in place. All those other statistics just talked about the impact of it, and yet only 15% say, yep, we've got one in place. So I was in a group of CEOs the other day. I was speaking at an event, about 600 people there. We had about 65 in this particular workshop. And I just asked that question, why do we not you would never let any other part of your business just wing it. You wouldn't let your production, your quality control, your HR, you don't even let janitors wing it. They've got to have a process with checklists. But
right?
when we get to the sales team, it's like, hey, just kind of go do your thing. Why do we let that happen?
Yeah.
So I asked the room just to hear what they were saying. What kind of things?
All ears.
What's that?
I said I'm all ears.
Oh, all ears. Yeah. So it was really interesting. The things we knew to be true. Typically, there's number one is there's no sales leader in place that's skilled to develop and coach to a sales process because the founder built the business on just sheer passion, energy, work ethic, and they just built this thing on their back. But that's not scalable. There's nobody in place to implement that knows how and has the experience to create a defined process and then implement it and hold a team accountable. That's why investing in your sales leader, spending time investing in your sales strategy and your sales leader will have massive impact on your effectiveness today, money in your bank today, but significant impact on valuation down the road as well. So that's a big one. But the other thing I think I see a lot, Phil, is people think sales is just an art. Just let people be themselves. And it's true a little bit. There is an art to sales for sure. But I think more so, sales is a science. And there's some art to it, but there's a lot of science to really effective selling. And my experience is even the most effective salespeople, when we don't want them to stop being who they are, but when we provide a little structure, sort of a runway, a conduit for all their energy and skill and passion and experience, and we create a runway for them and say, do these repeatable things, even the best get way better. And the ones that are sort of lagging behind, they can get on board and they tend to grow as well. So I think those are the two main reasons. There's not a sales leader that knows how to create and implement
Mhm.
a sales process. And sometimes we think we don't have to. We think it's just art. If I hire the right people, then they'll make it work. We
Dave,
just know that.
real quick, I know I do want to talk about performance, the third level of the equation there. But you reminded me as you were talking, or I was reminded as you were talking about something that I experienced very early in my career. I was between things. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next, and I took a job selling cars for a few months, and I had no thoughts that I would ever be a car salesperson for the rest of my career. It was just to get some sales experience, make a little bit of money, have some fun. And I thought, why not? So I jump in. So I'm at this dealership, this beautiful dealership, and there's 30 of us walking around, and we're just vying for every phone call, every person that walked on the lot, every lead was just gold, right? We were all just, there was no system. It was just a free for all. But there was one person in the dealership who had been there forever, and 90% of the people who came on the lot were there to see him. So we were all fighting over these people who walked in, and they weren't here to see us. They were here to see this dude. And he just had people lined up at his desk. There were literally a line always of five, six, seven, sometimes 10 or 12 people, families at his desk waiting to close their deals. And we're all just sitting around, you know, cracking jokes and drinking coffee and just not doing anything. And this guy had no personality. It wasn't about how flashy he was or how great. He just had a process he stayed committed to over a long period of time. And I started to understand what some of that was. It was a very defined marketing process, but he had stayed committed to it for a number of years, and it resulted in just business walking in the door, just lined up at his desk, closing deals every week in our sales meeting. This guy had 40 closings and everyone else had 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. And it was just like, wow, it was all process.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really brilliant. I learned that, like you, on my first sales job. I never intended to be in sales. It's not what I studied. It's not what I planned for. But situation dictated I needed to find employment. I was between things just like you, and I had a friend who managed the shoe department at a large box retail box store, and asked me if I wanted to just sell shoes a little bit while I was fair. I'm like, I never sold anything, but I need some money, so I'll give it a try.
Mhm.
And I was wildly successful. Just a couple of days a week, I was selling more than the people that had been there forever. And he kept asking me what I was doing, and I had no idea. But as I look back now, I understand. I just didn't know the terms then, and I didn't know kind of the science behind what I was doing, but it was working. And it was like you just said, it was a process. I would grab whoever's next. I would encourage them to come in and sit down. I would ask a series of 5 or 6 questions of the person. I would bring out multiple options, and then I would close it. And then I just repeated that day in and day out because that's all I knew. I didn't know anything about shoes, but I just had to have a process, and it was working. Um, Looking back, I see all that. I wish I knew then, but I think could have been maybe even more effective. Um, you're right. Process matters way more than knowledge, more than personality, more than art. All of those things are helpful. You got to know your product, got to have a little bit of personality, a little bit,
Sure.
but the science behind it, the
Yeah.
well-defined process will win every day.
Yeah. So what is this performance piece?
Okay. Well, with performance, what we focus on there is once we have a process in place, that's specifically milestone centric, a sales process that we can see we go from lead generation to however many milestones you build in your sales process all the way to the closing piece. Now we can begin to measure all of those. And when you can measure something, you can improve it.
Mhm.
Right. And so once there's a process in place, we can begin measuring what we refer to as leading indicators. Probably understand, but some of your listeners might have
Mhm.
to think a little bit about the difference between a leading indicator and a lagging indicator. Right. Lagging is like looking in the rearview mirror, what's already happened. That's your revenue. That's often the only thing we look at to determine how effective we are. Are we on target? Well, how did you make your targets? I don't know. We just put 12% on last year. So are you on target or not really doesn't matter when the target was so randomly built. Um, you could be doing way better, but we don't know that if we're not first measuring the leading indicators, the activities that lead up to that final close. So with the sales process in place, now we can measure how many conversations with prospective new clients am I having? How many of those conversations turn into opportunities to present a solution or a proposal? How many of those are turning into new clients? What's our average spend per client, and is that consistently going up, or is that flat or reducing? All of those leading indicators. Once we know those, now we can measure performance against those. So a good sales leader, once we've developed the right, that goes back to people, we have the right sales leader in place. Now we train him or her to be a great coach, to hold people accountable. Oh, there's a dirty word, right? Accountability. But it doesn't have to be. People think accountability is a dirty word because they've had a bad experience with it.
Mhm.
But a great coach will hold people accountable in a way that is very collaborative, and a togetherness that we agree on the path forward and how to get there. And that coach is going to help them and hold them accountable to the right activities that lead to the right results. So by performance, we mean accountability to the right activity.
No, I think that's beautiful. And I honestly, I think a lot of people want to be held accountable. You know, people desire, especially if people are goal oriented. A lot of people in sales are goal oriented, but you know, they need some structure and some accountability to perform well. And if they don't have it, their performance is going to drop off. If you look at any successful person in any endeavor in any field, they have more than one coach. You know, any professional athlete has probably a dozen coaches around them, from a nutritionist to a hairstylist to a movement, a behavioral therapist, a marriage counselor, a spiritual counselor. You know, it's, I mean, that you need to be, you know, to achieve your goals and to be a true professional, you have to be open to accountability and coaching. Just have to. And I think a lot the top performers desire that. So why not model that, right?
Yeah. And my experience is most sales top performers, they also want it. They just don't necessarily know it because they've had such bad leadership. The idea of accountability from a sales manager is just like a dirty word because it's been a poor experience. But once they experience in a really positive way, oh, they love it, and they thrive on it.
But Dave, walk us through like the beginning of your engagement with a client. So let's say someone who's listening to this podcast hits me up or hits you up directly afterward. Either way is fine. And where do you go from there? How do you assess their needs? How do you engage with them? How do you put something together for them that, you know, walk us through like the initial step in the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you mentioned needs analysis. I mean, that's obviously where we start. We would have just a conversation, where I would probably have a dozen questions and maybe more, which will just lead to them asking me questions, and we'd find out really what's going on. And if we decide there might be a partnership together where we can help them, we follow a 9-step pathway. The first most important step, though, right out of the beginning, is we call it our analysis phase. I don't just jump in and say, well, here's what you need to do these 5 things, and you're gonna, take this pill and call me in the morning, you'll be fine, right? Without, if a doctor starts prescribing things without doing all of the diagnostic work, they probably ought to lose their license, right? And I feel the same way about sales coaches and sales trainers who start telling you you should do this, and this, but they haven't really listened to what's going on in your organization first. So the first thing we do is a deep dive analysis. We do an assessment of the whole organization, of each individual in the organization. It's an online assessment tool that we use, followed up by a one-on-one with me or one of our coaches. And we look at current collateral, the CRM, anything to do. We interview all the leaders, and then I put it together into an executive action plan that we present to the leader and say, here's what we've identified as really the strengths of your organization that we want to capitalize. Here's some risks that we found that we really should focus our coaching on. And then from there, we get our marching orders. And then after that, the first stage is always a clarity phase where we're working on making sure maybe they have a process in place already. It just needs a little tweaking. Maybe they have a great process, just nobody's following it and using it. So we got to talk about implementation. Most of the time, though, they have no process. And so the first step is to build that sales process, to build a sales plan and a sales process. Then we get into our weekly or bi-weekly coaching sessions, usually at two levels with the sales team and with the sales leadership. We're doing either weekly or bi-weekly sessions. Um, and that can go on for years or months. We always ask for a minimum of 90 days because we want to help implement, not just train you on something and leave, but we want to make sure we've got the right cadence. We're actually implementing the strategies that we've developed.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've engaged with a client who I thought would be a short-term engagement, turned out to be years, uh, because they needed help. And once we built that rapport and that trust, um, it just we just wanted to continue. 90 days is a very short amount of time, so
It really is.
enough to barely get to know someone, probably enough to be able to show your value, and for someone to make a longer decision to retain you longer if it's still a good fit. And that kind of leads me into my next question. I wanted to ask if you could share an example of a client you worked with. You shared one earlier, but is there another client you that comes to mind that maybe you can think these examples are kind of helpful to kind of understand how you engage with people and kind of some of the work you do?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, the one I mentioned before is in Houston, outside of Houston actually, and they're in a manufacturing industry. I'm working with another organization in a professional services industry, and currently working with them actually, and it's still a founder led organization. When we got involved, the salespeople still completely report to that founder. The founder is young, energetic, um, it built the whole business on charisma and drive and a hard work ethic, just like many organizations that you work with. It's all because the founder was that go-getter and they knew something and they had something to show and they take off and they grow it. And then it gets to this point where like, now I don't know what to do next. And you begin to hit this plateau. And that's where we weren't quite there. This organization was still steady upwards, but could see that coming where I can't carry this forever. And I don't have any plans to exit anytime soon because he's young. But he knows down the road, if we're going to keep this thing short term growing, long term, be ready to sell or pass on, we got to do something. So we got engaged. We pulled the team together, did a workshop where we corped together, built a sales process. We built out ideal client profiles and a plan to go after them. And now what we're seeing is that the salespeople, we meet every Friday to talk about whatever the development topic we're on, but also we do a kind of a pipeline review. Everybody brings an example of somewhere they are in a sales process with something, and we workshop it together and kind of co-coach each other. And then I'll bring in whatever the development topic is for that particular day, whether it's lead generation or asking questions or closing, or it could be a mindset or psychological component for that week that we're talking about. And so now what we're seeing right now, we just got the financial report. They're 20% up right now, 20%, 22% growth right now over last year. And I've been working with them for, I don't know, about 5 or 6 months now. Just really strong, working with them to develop that process. We've identified who we think will be the next sales leader, but we just don't jump into that too fast. But we know that's the next step. Now that we have our processes built, we've got structure in place. Now we want to put that next leader to take all of that off of the founder slash owner so he can do more working on the business, rather than the proverbially working in the business, which he's doing every day right now.
Love it, love it. Are you working throughout the U.S. or do you have a certain area you prefer to stay in?
Now we're actually global as an organization. I myself have clients all over the US and Canada.
Okay.
My only limitation is not geographic, but I do only speak English, unfortunately. But we do have coaches that speak. We have Spanish speaking coaches. We've got Swedish, people from Spain, Italy. We've got coaches all over the globe that can meet a client's needs. My personal clients, though, are all North American based.
Okay. All right. Great. No, that's fantastic. How did you get into this? What's your background?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I spent the first 10 years of my professional life in the nonprofit world. I worked as a camp director. I worked in churches in various leadership roles, and I actually worked in a museum for a while as a director of guest services. So, kind of, you could say that's sort of my cutting my teeth on sales in that role. But then the time came for a variety of reasons that we felt we needed to look at a career that could be a little bit more. I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to grow my own opportunities and have the flexibility for family life that I wanted. And so I'm dabbling around and tried a few different sales things until I finally settled on insurance. And I spent 15 years building an insurance practice here in Northwest Ohio, where I am now. And I loved it. But what I loved best wasn't the insurance. It was working with these business owners to help design an insurance plan, a benefits plan that could help them grow and scale their business. So I'd find my conversations were less and less and less about insurance and more and more about how to grow their business, how to grow sales, how to develop teams, how to create culture, all the things I did with my own insurance practice to scale it. I was helping other businesses do it. I had a friend say, you should spend your time, you should begin to monetize what you're really passionate about. So I thought I would start a sales coaching company. And I started down that road, but I had another mutual friend connect me with SalesStar, which is a global company out of New Zealand. At that time, they were only in New Zealand and wanted to go global. And so my partner and I developed the first US franchise, and we've been doing this for almost 6 years now.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, it's a true need that needs to be met. And I kind of going back to the very beginning of our conversation, I really think a lot of the business owners that I work with, they really don't know what to do about sales. Like you said, they think it's personality. They don't have a structure, but they really don't know where to go to get one. And so it's this fleeting thing. And so I think the service you provide is so important. And like I said, it's a huge component of business valuation and profitability. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited to have you part of our community, and I really appreciate all of your insight on today's podcast. I have a couple other questions before we wrap up. One of them is I'm always interested in knowing what people do kind of outside of their careers, if they're involved in volunteer stuff, neighborhood associations, charitable organizations. Sometimes people are traveling the world doing mission work, going on crazy excursions. And is there anything you want to share that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have a large family. I've been blessed with 7 kids. Three of them are married now, so I've got my first round of three grandchildren as well. So much of my time is whatever's going on with my kids right now. So a lot of church activities, youth group activities. We've been blessed with a lot of property and on a big house, so we try to have the youth group and different activities out at our house all the time. We just love being involved in our church community. In addition to that, in addition to sales coaching, I also coach my son's rifle team. So we do competitive rifle shooting. And we do that through a local conservation club. And the great thing is, three of my four sons are all better than me now. So the student has become way better than the coach now. So and it's a lot of fun. It's just a blast to be able to spend time doing that. There's probably a lot of other things, but between running to see the grandkids and spending time with the ones I still have at home, that's the bulk of my time.
Well, thank you, and congrats on the grandkids. I have four of my own, and they're a huge,
Oh,
they're always a priority. Nothing else is going to trump that time with the grandkids.
really.
Um, how can someone get in touch with you if they want to track you down?
Sure. Well, david.mullins@salesstar.com is an easy way. Probably the easiest though is just to look for me on LinkedIn, David Mullins, SalesStar. I'm in Northwest Ohio. I put my phone number right out there on LinkedIn. We could put it in the comment section here if you want as well for people to get a hold of me. You can always just reach out to Phil at Tamarisk. They know how to get a hold of me as well. That's maybe a good thing for them to know anyway, reaching out to Phil and he can pass you on my contact information. But happy to talk to anyone that just might have a few questions at an early stage here.
Yeah, sounds good. Dave, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
The only thing I would say is it's never too early to get started on these things. What you do now to help build business valuation will actually help you right now, too. You don't have to wait till the end is in sight. The effectiveness now, the growth, the development, the process now is going to help you be more profitable now, but it's also obviously having a significant impact when you look to the end. So it's never too early to get started, is what I meant to say there. Never too early to get started.
Thank you so much, Dave. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Take care.